Hello, this is Grant Irons from AWS Educate. Thank you for joining the Supporting the Rapid Transition to Remote Learning webinar series from Amazon Web Services. Educators all over the world are rapidly transitioning to remote learning, some for the very first time, and we wanted to help ease that transition. This webinar series was created for educators by educators who have expertise in remote learning and can share their insights with you. Please refer to the website to access recordings of past webinars in over 100 languages through subtitles. With that, I'd like to introduce Morgan Nixon for part 2 of Online Engagement Strategies for English Language Learners. You can access part 1 on the webinar series website or on YouTube.
Thanks again, Grant, for inviting me to speak with such a wonderful group of educators today. And hello again to everyone around the world. As Grant mentioned, my name is Morgan Nixon. I'm an instructional designer and online course developer for English language educators with TESOL International Association. I'm passionate about understanding the needs of the English language learning community for both students and educators, and designing engaging learning experiences for global classrooms to support those needs. I taught in South Korea and Tokyo, Japan, and have conducted teacher training in Peru. And I'm a recent graduate of Harvard's Graduate School of Education in Technology, Innovation, and Education. I listed my email for you to get in touch with me if you have any further questions. I'm more than happy to stay connected. This webinar is part 2 of a 2-part series in our online engagement strategies for English language learners webinar. A link to part 1 can be found at the end of the presentation and also in the notes below. Today, we will start from the beginning of a learning experience by discussing how to interact with and check in with learners. Then we will discuss ways to scaffold or provide support for the information we are teaching. Then we will review ways that we can engage and have fun with our learners once we have built these scaffolds. Hopefully, I can help shed some light onto how to transform that improvement that you mentioned in the previous webinar into our inspiration. It's important to note that the following strategies can be incorporated within already existing structures, and what you are doing now can be enhanced by strategies for greater learning experiences. The first characteristic of online learning that I'd like to address is the need for increased interaction and check-ins. Now, why do I say this? In face-to-face classes, noticing if students are falling behind in class is a bit easier, right? We can see it on their faces. We can see if they're looking out the window or talking to a friend. If they're working on an assignment, we can see if they're writing or engaging with the assignment. The visual cues are apparent. In online classes, not so much. We can, of course, see if the students are logging into class, but what if our students don't have the internet? What if our students aren't understanding the instructions to an assignment? What if our students have questions that they can't ask during the live class session? What do we ask English language educators to do to support students in simply logging into the course, interacting with the course content, and participating with activities? Strategy 5, make interactions with parents accessible. Sometimes parents of English learners may not speak English, yet it is still essential to keep them updated on their child's progress throughout their learning journeys. An application called Talking Points allows communication with parents in their home languages. This way, educators can get parents involved in their child's interactions with learning and can help in facilitating participation in online classes. Strategy 6, set up a texting group for students and parents. Keep a list of parents' phone numbers and, depending on the ages of students, a list of students' phone numbers as well. When it is time to log into class online or submit an assignment, send out a group text to remind those involved of the upcoming event. WhatsApp is a great application for messaging both international and domestic numbers in one group to continue communication with students and check in to see if they have any questions. I know a lot of followers in China might know about WeChat or in Korea, KakaoTalk. There are tons of messaging apps that can be integrated into social settings and education settings. Strategy 7, create a dedicated question and answer space. Create a dedicated space for students and family members to ask questions. I love Google Forms because you can create short surveys and quizzes. Create a form or a survey of some kind to ask students how they're doing, what they need help on, and what topics they could use more explanation in. Images can be added to these forms to scaffold the questions and make for easier understanding. Try using emojis to ask students how they're doing. If you're using a learning management system like Google Classrooms or Blackboard or Canvas, you can set up a question and answer discussion forum to dedicated space for inquiry, interaction, and engagement. Strategy 8, design a reflection space for learners. Allow learners to keep an online journal to check in. What's great about online journals is that learners of varying proficiencies can participate. So learners can engage in deep writing, which is also a writing activity. They can post a photo with one sentence as a caption. They can post an audio message to update you on their life. They can post a video of their everyday routine. You can have a prompt of the day with a language skill of the day, and learners can post a response according to that language skill. Journals are so multifunctional, and they can be used with beginner levels to advanced learners. It all begins with the prompt. This can be done by having students write their entries on paper, take a picture, or send in the picture to you as a text message. This uses little bandwidth and computer time. You can also use a class blog site. I like EduBlogs and WordPress. You can also take a Google Doc or Google Slide or another collaborative tool and keep a rolling document of all of the students' reflections from the class. Students can engage in all the language skills in one document by posting text, audio, visuals, and more. So remember, though we are not present in students' physical space, it's still necessary to remain present in our students' everyday lives. Consider ways that you can check in with students and give space for them to individually ask questions and engage with you as a teacher personally. Here are some takeaways from Section 1. Remain present despite the distance. Give space for students to ask questions and engage personally. Find ways to get to know your students. Call your students and speak with them personally. Here are some questions that you can consider when you create ways for students to check in and interact. How can I ensure that my learners understand the learning goals with and without the use of technology? Can this assignment be adapted to a journal activity, a phone call, a drawing? How can the assignment that I initially planned be changed to adapt to the circumstances that are being presented to me and my students? As a reminder, here's a list of the technology that I mentioned in this section. But let's not forget, there are always opportunities to innovate online or offline. Feel empowered to create. We mentioned online applications for connecting with families, online forum tools, instant messaging apps, text, blog sites, online documents, and presentation tools. So let's engage in our 30-second wrap-up. I'll read the wrap-up question in yellow. Choose one strategy from this section. How can you take this idea and adapt it to your context? Step 1, read the question above in yellow. Step 2, write your answer in the chat box. Step 3, review the comments from others in the webinar. So let's begin. Our 30 seconds starts now. So thanks so much for answering. Now you have one strategy that you can incorporate into your own classroom tomorrow next week, or next month. The next strategy we will review is scaffolding information. This means that rather than providing information to English learners in the same way we would provide information to English speakers, we would create supports for learners to better understand the information. Think of a house. If the house does not have the correct foundation, it is cracked and the bricks aren't put together the way they should be, it would eventually fall apart. A house needs the correct support to be held up and remain standing for years. This is the same with students. All students actually, not simply English learners. If a student doesn't have the correct support to understand the instructions of a lesson is not provided with the help and organized information along the way, this student's rate of success will fall far behind. Here are a number of strategies that are used with English learners that will greatly transform their learning experiences in both online learning environments and offline learning environments. Strategy 5, provide opportunities to think first. For English learners, the time to understand the words used in a sentence and then respond will be slower than for a person who speaks English and can interact in a conversation rapidly. Therefore, it is important to provide opportunities for students to think first before asking them to demonstrate their knowledge. This can be done in a number of ways. First, exercise wait time. Wait at least 30 seconds after you ask a question so that learners can think about the question that they are being asked and think about the vocabulary you used and think about how they might respond. If learners are expected to respond immediately, they may not be able to think about the language. Or you can create a collaborative concept map online using a web application like MindMap. I love this website because multiple students can add to the concept map at one time and in real time. The ideas on the map can be color-coded to indicate how ideas relate to each other, and students can add images and links to the map as well. Another way to provide opportunities to think first is when teaching stories. Say you're a 7th grade reading teacher who has an English learner in your class. You can create a concept map of characters in the story, and students can list the characteristics of each character from appearance to personality type to the events that happen in their lives. You can provide a word bank on the side of the mind map so that students can easily see the vocabulary that is associated with each character. Imagine you're a history teacher. The same can be done by listing out the historical figures that were involved in a historical event. Perhaps after the characters are listed, you can have the students make a sequence map of the historical event from what happened first, second, third, and so on. The opportunities for mapping and thinking first are endless. You can have students draw the setting of what you're studying. With so many details in a story or an event, the ideas can get lost very easily. Students can draw the setting and then label what they drew using vocabulary words. This can be done in reading classes, history classes, or even biology class. I personally would need to draw a cell or a certain body part to be able to learn more about it in biology class. In my personal experience, I had my university level English learners draw when they were reading the book Robin Hood. Understanding the setting and the historical context was difficult for my students. So by drawing and labeling Sherwood Forest and all of the characters involved in the story was extremely helpful. You can also give students time to think by allowing them to interact with summaries. Write a summary of the stories before your students read them to provide the main ideas of how the story will take place. This allows learners an association and time to think about the events of the story even before reading it. After each chapter of the story, have your students summarize what they learned from that part of the story before moving on to the next part. Say you're a math teacher and you're teaching geometry. Rather than simply teaching about special right triangles, provide a story and a summary associated with special right triangles. Maybe 3 students in the class, Ziomara, Ahmed, and Marie, are trying to build a cabinet and they need to make special right triangles. They measure each side of the triangle, but they don't know what length the third side should be. First, you would summarize the story. Second, you would ask a comprehension check question to ensure that students understand the story. For instance, you might ask, who is in the story? How many people are in the story? What are they trying to build? Third, you would have them solve the problem. They would be able to solve the problem more clearly because they have the context and they were given a summary of ideas first, rather than being presented with a shape and a blank line and then being asked to fill in the blank line. Strategy 6, organize information. Part of teaching English learners is to organize information and build routines so that learners always know where to look for the information they need. Think about this presentation. What color are the strategies written in? What type of slide indicates a new section? The same can be done for your classrooms and presentations. Organize information so that over time, students know exactly what they are looking for and where to look if they need support. This can be done by color coding information. Rather than creating your presentation in all black, color code the information that students will need to reference. For example, if your students see the color red, that means it's a vocabulary word you need them to know. If your students see the color green, that means that the text is an example. Say you are a geography teacher who has English learners in your classroom. You're teaching about borders around the world. Each border would be drawn in red. Each city name would be green. Each body of water name would be blue. Each set of instructions for the class tasks would be in purple. You can even do a comprehension check with students and ask them, what color is the border? They would answer, red. You can also organize your information by creating a class resource page online. This is a special place where English learners can always go to find the most important information from a lesson. This page can include vocabulary words with an associated video about each word, a sentence to explain each concept in an understandable way, a video about the process of that concept, and more. Say you are a chemistry teacher and you have English learners in your class. You're teaching a unit called What is a Calorie? In the reference section, your vocabulary words would be calorie, weight gain, weight loss, protein, carbohydrates, fat. And you would have a picture of the effects of different amounts of calories. You would include a video of the effects of calories with key information in simple language. I might even add arrows to help each learner understand better. You could also create a glossary on a rolling document for all of the vocabulary used in each unit. Learners can click on the word, then be directed to a definition of that word in one document. You can add to this document as you teach. The glossary can also be downloaded for offline viewing for our learners with little or no internet access. Strategy 7, create short video lessons. Create short lessons for students to access both online and offline. For English learners, being able to access information to assist with their learning is essential. Create your own lessons that are short and can be accessed online or offline. These can be video lessons of you standing or teaching, or video screen captures of your presentations on your computer with an audio recording over top, similar to this webinar. You can even create an audio recording of you explaining concepts. Be sure that your learners are able to watch the videos both online and offline. Send the videos via email in a compressed zip file. Upload lessons online to YouTube. Record your screen as you are explaining PowerPoint presentations or writing on a virtual whiteboard. You can record your screen by using QuickTime, which usually comes with computers or any other screen capture software that works best for you. Remember, distance learning does not mean simply sitting at a computer. Be sure to create opportunities for asynchronous and synchronous learning. Learning can happen at any time. You can even send videos in your class texting group like WhatsApp so that students can download the videos to their phones and view the lessons offline. So here are a few takeaways from this lesson. Guide your students through a step-by-step process throughout each lesson, activity, and assignment. Understand that learners internalize language in a variety of ways. So provide multiple entry points and supports in order for learners to understand the language in order to understand the concepts. Here are some questions to consider as you design these scaffolding experiences. How can I take a step back from my content that I understand to ensure that my students understand first? How can I set up systems in my classroom so that my students always know where to go for support? As a reminder, here's a list of the technology that I mentioned in this section, but let's not forget, there are always opportunities to innovate. Online or offline, feel empowered to create. We mentioned online document writing tools, video editors, and online presentation tools. Let's engage in our 30-second wrap-up question. I'll read the question in yellow at the top of the screen. Choose one strategy from this section. How can you take this idea and adapt it to your context? Step 1, read the question above in yellow. Step 2, write your answer in the chat box. Step 3, review the comments from others in the webinar. So let's begin our 30 seconds, starting now. Thanks so much for answering. So again, you have one more strategy that you can use in your classroom tomorrow, next week, or next month. The third characteristic of online learning that I'd like to address is the need for meaningful engagement. Now, what do I mean when I say this? At the onset of the pandemic, so many teachers were sending home packets of worksheets for their students to complete. Understandably, this is an effective route for classrooms in a time of crisis. But what happens when students become bored of the monotony of packets of worksheets being sent home? What if the information in those packets had nothing to do with the lives of their students? What else can educators do to engage English learners in fun, meaningful activities? When students are able to connect knowledge to their lives, they are able to retain that knowledge for longer and better understand how this information works within a larger system of the world that they're living in. This is true for all students, but especially English learners who may not even have learned this information in their home countries or in their first languages. Let's explore some strategies. Strategy 5, encourage real-time responses. Have learners respond in real time. Allow learners to respond to questions through speech. This is great for listening and speaking practice. Ask a question during a live session or an offline activity. Allow learners a time period to respond. Have learners use Flipgrid to speak their responses to the question. For example, if you're teaching a reading lesson and your learners read the first page of the story Cinderella, you can ask the question, what do you think will happen next with Cinderella? Don't forget to use the future tense in your answer. Learners will use the code that you provide for them, log on to Flipgrid, and speak their answer. Beginner learners might say something like, Cinderella will clean the house. More advanced learners might say something like, Cinderella will do what she is told by her evil stepsisters, but will eventually want to leave the house and attend the royal ball. Your learners can see each other's responses and add fun emojis for engagement. Learners can also respond in real time by engaging in a poll or a game. Poll Everywhere is an excellent opportunity to create different types of questions that learners can engage with in real time and also see the answers in real time as well. Say you're teaching a writing lesson to high school English learners who are learning about the parts of a paragraph. You present the parts of a paragraph in a PowerPoint lesson, but each part is in the incorrect order. You can send out a live poll for learners to put the parts of the paragraph in the correct order. If you see that some learners get that information incorrect, you can see who answered incorrectly and then explain the rationale behind the correct answer. Similarly, you can use Kahoot in your classes. Kahoot is popular with English language classes because the teacher can make a quiz in real time very quickly. Learners can log into that live quiz on any device and answer the questions to that quiz in a multiple choice format. It's essentially a timed game where learners quickly answer questions by clicking a shape that is associated with an answer to the question, making it great for young learners. Your whole class can engage in this activity using Kahoot. I used Kahoot even with my adult learners when I was teaching in Maryland, and it was a hit. All the adults were jumping right out of their seats to answer the questions. So this activity can be used with so many age groups and so many proficiency levels. Strategy 5, include icebreakers at the start of lessons. Break the ice. Start each live class or each day with a game or activity in order for students to get excited about their upcoming learning experience. This is similar to building motivation in face-to-face classes where we might present a picture on the screen or ask a motivating question. Online, this might look a little bit different, so let's take a look. We can send our students a prompt at the same time at the start of each day. By the end of the day, they should engage with that prompt in any way that they know how. For example, send in a video, give the teacher a phone call, send a picture, write a journal entry. This way, you're allowing learners to engage with any one of the language skills, but also encouraging learners to use any means that works for them to practice that language skill. So say I am teaching university English learners and our topic is leadership and our grammar point is conditionals. At 9 o'clock every morning for that week, as a teacher, I might send out an email or a text message or a video of myself asking a question. What would you do if you were a learner today? Or what would you do if you were a leader of your country? Or what would you do if you were a leader of a big company? The students would answer this question before their scheduled online class time by sending in an email with their answer or sending in a picture with the caption or adding their answer to their journal entry. You can even be flexible with time here. If their class is on a Monday, assign the question Friday evening to give them all the weekend to think about their answer. There are so many opportunities to allow students to think about their learning in meaningful ways outside of their scheduled live online sessions. Before each class, play Pictionary on a virtual whiteboard, where some students draw and other students use English to guess what they are drawing. You can use whiteboards like Whiteboard, and then share your screen or share the whiteboard link. Send each student a word that is included in their vocabulary list for the week. Have a student draw their interpretation of the word without using any words themselves on the drawing. Students will guess the vocabulary word for each picture before starting class. This is a fun way to get students ready and make students want to come to live online sessions. Students will also be thinking about their vocabulary word outside of the live session. After sharing their picture with the class, they can engage in a speaking activity to inform learners of how their drawing matches to their assigned vocabulary word. From a personal perspective, once one of my classes at Harvard was moved online, my professor started each class with this Pictionary activity. So there is a space for Pictionary games at Harvard and in your classes with English learners as well. These activities can be incorporated into any classroom. So as a reminder, here are some takeaways for engaging with English language learners online. Use interactive multimedia formats. Encourage multiple entry points for language. Find fun ways to rethink activities you use in the classroom. Use various resources both online and offline. Use the current household environment as your classroom as well. Consider these questions as you create ways for your students to get the support they need and engage in their learning. How can I rethink my current activities using multiple media sources? How can I take what I have and what my students have and utilize it for learning? What could be a learning opportunity that I never have thought of before? As a reminder, here's a list of the technology that I mentioned in this section. But let's not forget, there are always opportunities to innovate. Online or offline, feel empowered to create. We discussed Flipgrid, Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, and Whiteboard. So now let's engage in our 30-second wrap-up question. And I'll read the question in yellow located at the top of your screen. Choose one strategy from this section. How can you take this idea and adapt it to your context? Step 1. Read the question above in yellow. Step 2. Type your answer in the chat box. Step 3. Review the comments from others in the webinar. So let's begin our 30 seconds starting now. Thanks so much for answering. So, similarly, you have one strategy that you can use in your context starting tomorrow. As a review, here are the ideas that we learned about in part 2 of our webinar. We reviewed the ways in which we can get our English learners interacting and participating and logged into the course. We remembered that all learning does not have to be online, and we can use technology that learners have outside of a computer to get them to interact. We also reviewed different supports that we can provide our learners to ensure their understanding of everything from instructions to content to their own learning goals. Lastly, we reviewed engagement strategies and we reconsidered the ways that our everyday lessons can be spruced up to include fun, engaging opportunities for learning that we may not have considered before. You now have 3 strategies from our wrap-up questions after each section, where you closely considered how each strategy could be adapted for your own teaching context. Thank you so much for your participation. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you so much for your service.